Hey guys, Bratty Biker here. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to the channel. If you guys are liking what you're seeing right now in front of your screen, this is the finished engine that's been completely rebuilt along with some very interesting parts, as you guys can already see. A small disclaimer, this is the first time I'm rebuilding an engine, let alone a Yamaha RX engine. Anyways, I have made some mistakes, but I have edited them out to save your time, but I will point them out because you can always expect the unexpected. With that said, let's begin. As all the new bearings have already been installed, the crank goes in first. Now I'm assembling the gearbox in my hand before slotting them right through the case. And yep, she goes in. Next I'm just gonna check is everything rotating freely without any resistance. And it does, and it was very fascinating to watch, so I kept on doing it for a long time. Now usually the next step would be to apply anabond or any sealant material and then install both the cases, but here is where a setback happened. One bearing was not installed correctly, so I had to remove and do it again. Anyways, nothing to worry because I did the bearing correction method off camera. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove all the unfortunately wasted gasket material using a blade, a pen knife, and I think it works great. So like this, couple of setbacks did happen which kept me moving backwards regarding this build. That's why it did take a long time. Couple of them were my mistakes, couple of them were because of very pathetic tools. One of them being a magnet holder, a magnet puller actually, so I had to replace that as well. Anyways, now that's done, we are gonna put new sealant, same anabond. Because I tried installing both the cases, the crank has been stuck to the left side case. So because of that, it's actually very easy to install. You guys will see it right now. Yep, it just goes and slots in. Now you have to install all the screws, I think 11 of them. Some of them are of different sizes, so I had to use a trial and error method and then get it done. Now there is an order to tighten them up, so I'm using my service manual and doing it with a screwdriver first, and then I'll be using a torque wrench and then torquing it to spec. One good thing that you can do when you're tightening things up is to always keep checking if the rotation is free, because when you're tightening them down, you want to make sure there is no resistance that's also building up. Thanks to that method, I was able to identify the wrongly installed bearing and I did it correctly. I also made the mistake of rounding off some of the screws, but they shouldn't be a problem. Now we'll be installing the primary gear collar, the oil seal, and then the main primary gear with its woodruff key, and it's set. Next will be the kick shaft, the assembly has been rebuilt. Next will be the idler gear. It has 2 washers and 2 circlips which has to be replaced during every rebuild. Now we'll be installing the retainer plate on the primary gear oil seal. Unfortunately I did destroy the screw, but hopefully it's not going to be a big issue. Next will be the shift shaft. Next will be the clutch assembly, the collar, the washer, the clutch boss, the clutch bell, the main nut. We'll be torquing it to spec. We need to hold the clutch boss. We have a special tool there, and again I'm inspecting if it's rotating freely using the service manual to make sure the clutch plates and steel plates are in order. I've installed the push rod and then the top plate and all the 4 springs. Again we'll be torquing them in a crisscross pattern so that they don't break. They are very brittle bolts actually. Then they'll also be needing to get torqued. I'm using a coin and retaining that. I have to torque the primary gear and using I'm just having it held there and then torquing the clutch assembly. Now the big boy is there to torque the primary gear. Quite hard actually, but the click is satisfying. Again checking everything is fine. The oil seals on the left side has been installed off camera. Now installing the coil plate, which looks very interesting. It's an upgraded unit. I'll be explaining in detail more about it soon. Installing the 2 screws that has to be held in position. The pickup coil is external and it was actually a little bit loose, so I just had to tighten it down. Now magnet is getting in and tightening the pickup coil, and just want to use a small tap with a mallet so that the magnet is seated properly. Installing the nut. The problem with this magnet is that my holder did not work with it. The holes given on the magnet is a little too small for the notches to go in, so that did not work. So I was a little confused as to what I can do. But one trick worked. I used that old coin that I used to have it jammed in between the clutch bell and the primary gear, and that worked perfectly. So here the magnet is tightened. It looks barbaric, but I don't know a better way. Now I'm gonna connect the neutral switch so that it will work. It will show that green light on the neutral box. Now I'm taking a short break and putting a story up on Instagram. You guys can follow me at BrattyBiker. So if you guys want to talk to me directly, you guys can follow me there and message me. Putting up a story. Now time to get back to work. You guys can see the block piston now. I'm also messaging my friend just to make sure everything is okay. Filing the wrist pin. Install the new piston pin bearing, and slightly struggling to install it, but it's not too hard. So the plan is to install the circlip on one side, take the piston out, put the piston back into the block in halfway, put the wrist pin back onto the connecting rod, and then put the last side of the circlip, and you have your job done. Thanks to my friend Darshan on guiding me through this, because I'm actually talking to him when I was doing this. So that was great. It was actually not that hard. Now that one side of the wrist pin is inside, I was advised to take the piston off, oil it, and then install it so that I don't end up scratching or damaging the block. So that's the plan. I'm oiling it throughout and installing it halfway, as you guys can see that. I'll be turning the crankcase over and using a mallet to support it so that it doesn't fall off. I'm using a gasket for the bottom end gasket, using a silicone sealant, and then installing the gasket. Now just making sure that the gasket is well seated. Now I will be using the sealant on the block's mating surface so that it's packed nice and well. You do not want a vacuum leak there. So now that is done. I'm using a mallet on that side. It's not very visible to the camera. I'm installing the wrist pin. Now that's in, and then I'm going to install the circlip. It's actually a two-man job, but anyways, we can still get it done using a cloth so that it doesn't fall inside, the circlip doesn't fall inside. Thankfully to the plier, it was not a hard job at all. It was a bracket in plier, so it helped a lot in getting the circlip in. Now that's done, I'm just reapplying gasket one more time, because while doing I did stain my hands with it, just making sure it doesn't leak. And now the block is set. You guys can see how it works. I'm just thanking my friend for that, because that was a very useful, helpful tip. Again, checking everything if everything rotates freely without any problems. I forgot to install the drain bolt, so I'm just fiddling with the torque wrench and then making sure that is also done. I actually love working on torque wrenches, working with them. They're a little bit finicky to move around the settings, but I don't know why, I really love them. Yeah, now that's done, I find the neutral rubber to be pretty loose, so I'm just keeping on installing it again and again. The block nuts actually have a torque value, but it's impossible to get a torque wrench inside that. I don't know how Yamaha did it back in the day. You have a crowfoot extension, but that doesn't work. So moving on, I just use hand torque on there. Now installing studs. These are some good quality studs. Again, there were some issues on the block, especially because it was helicoil repaired by someone else when I got it from the junkyard. So one of the studs were actually slightly slanted, so the head had a hard time to go in freely, so that required some effort. And again, I did edit that part out because I didn't want to waste your time. After doing that, the head did go in. It's still slightly tilts for front and back, but that has been sorted now. Now I'm just hand torquing all the head bolts in a crisscross pattern. I will be redoing it properly once the engine is sat on the motorcycle. And finally, the engine has been completely rebuilt. I did install a new reed valve gasket, a new reed valve, and a new intake manifold of the RX 135 off camera. And this, as you guys can see, is a Mikuni TM24 flat slide carburetor. I believe it will help with improving the responsiveness, the throttle response of the motorcycle. This has been completely rebuilt. Parts had to be imported from America. Jetting has to be done because it's not been jetted for this particular setup. So once the engine is on the chassis and once it's running, I'll be able to judge and jet accordingly. Coming down below, inside you have your 5-speed gearbox from the RX King, and the clutch bell and the primary gear is of the Indian RX 135 4-speed. And coming to the side, you guys can see a very interesting looking magnet rotor coil plate, as I've said earlier before. This is from Alid Electronics, thanks to one Mr. Abdul Rahman sir. So one cool thing about, actually two cool things about this is that, number one, it will be able to dynamically adjust the ignition timing with respect to the engine RPM. The second cool thing about it is that it will support much better, much brighter lighting, which is very much needed on all Yamaha RX motorcycles, because the lighting on the stock setup is pretty bad. So the lighting on the stock setup supports up to 35 watts. This one can, I think it can hold up till 65 watts. So I think that would be really great. With that said, I'm incredibly excited for this build, and the last piece of the puzzle that I can solve has been solved, and that is this engine. I'm now waiting for the parts that I've given for painting to come back with fresh paint. Unfortunately, it's been getting delayed for a long time. It's almost been 3 months, but I'm still not gotten any of them back. But it should come pretty soon, hopefully. With that said, thanks a lot for watching. If you like this video, do leave a like below. Do comment down your video suggestions and video requests. I shall put in my best efforts to get it done for you guys. Do share this video with your fellow two-strokers. Do subscribe to this channel. Keep the blue smoke alive. Ratty Baker signing off. Have a wonderful day.